So it's been a good morning, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have a seat. I think what I'll do is I'd like to give you all a little bit of a background about the brick and mortar side of our industry, and particularly the shopping center piece of that. And then Kevin and I are going to have a little conversation about really some of the integration of technology on the shopping center side. We've been talking about technology on the retail side, but technology on the shopping center side that ties into retail. I'm head of the International Council of Shopping Centers, and we're a trade association that we represent all of the shopping mall owners and a lot of the retailers around the world. And so we're the real estate trade association for that piece of the industry. And you know, my little sex story is I do think that the shopping center industry is the second oldest profession in the world. You know the first. But put this in perspective, 50,000 years ago, people got together to trade goods, and they wanted to find a place that was protected from the elements, and so they met under a tree. And so that was a good idea, and sometimes the lion would come, and so the lion terrorist or whatever it might be, and so they needed a place for safety, and so they could run up and hide in the tree until all of that passed. And they put some stones there so they could sit and socialize. And that really was the root of commerce and the root, I think, of most of civilization. And if you think about the great cities of the world, they all had their bazaar, their souk, their agora, their forum, their centro plaza, something like that. And in the modern world, and certainly in the United States, we evolved through a stage of various shopping malls and shopping centers. And so that's the industry that we represent, and the perspective that Kevin and I want to bring to this discussion. I love the theme of this event, and thank you for including us in the event. The idea of igniting the customer experience is absolutely top of mind for our industry, as it is for all aspects of the retailing industry. Last week, I was in Istanbul at one of our events, and the theme was, "Are you being served?" And the whole focus was on, are we meeting the stakeholders and the customers' needs? This week, I was in Cartagena, and we had a conference, and the theme of the conference was Servicio más que nada. Nothing's more important than service. And so as an industry, we're really all thinking along the same lines, that it is all about the customer. And also, that's what's unique about the shopping center industry. If you're in the office business, you really don't interact with the business of your tenants, and quite often you don't even know your tenants. In our industry, it's the only real estate sector where we need to and want to know about the business of the retailer's customers. And if the customer buys more, the retailer does well, and if the retailer does well, the shopping center does well. So it is a unique symbiotic relationship. And we also see this in the makeup of the industry. Many of our more prominent shopping center owners and mall developers started on the retailing side, and they had a store and they were paying rent to a landlord, and they realized they were paying 20, 30% of their expenses in operating costs. Why shouldn't they become a landlord and make a little money on the side? And so that kind of became the evolution of, if you will, the modern shopping mall in the United States in the 1950s, as these merchants, as these retailers evolved into real estate landlords. So this kind of brings us to where we are today. And I think one of the sad themes that we're hearing more and more is the mall is dead. It was in the media 2 weeks ago. It was in the media this week. There was a piece that CBS did 2 Sundays ago about the mall is dead. And it was a 2-part series. And if you stuck around for the second part, the first part was not that interesting, but the message was very strong. If you stuck around for the second part, they talked about how shopping centers were beginning to innovate. And so the whole idea was not really true that they were dead, but it wasn't a very good theme. The analysts are saying the mall is dead, the shopping center industry is dead. And what seems to be missed in all of this is when people ask me, how's your industry doing? I don't respond how the real estate is doing, I respond how the retail is doing. And if the retail is doing well, the real estate is doing well, and by and large, the retail is doing well, and therefore the real estate is doing well. But analysts and people hear about the internet, technology, a tepid economy, a cautious consumer, and they're convinced that the shopping center industry must be dead. Well, this is not a new story, it's an old story. This was from July 20th, 1998, the cover story of Time magazine, Kiss Your Mall Goodbye. And as the internet was beginning to sell more products, people were convinced that was the demise of the shopping center industry. So I think that's the old story, but frankly, it's long live the mall. I think the mall is the place where retail takes place, and therefore there is this unique symbiosis. The other thing about our industry right now is if you're an economist, you know supply and demand are important. Demand for the space actually is quite strong. Retailers are looking for space, rents are going up, occupancy rates are going up, and on the supply side, as was reported also in the paper last week, there had not been a new mall built in the United States in the last 5 years. When I contacted the reporter, I said, that's absolutely not true. And he said, well, there hasn't been a 1980s mall built in the last 5 years. I said, that is true, but who would build a 1980s mall today anyway? There is lots of redevelopment, re-envisioning, and reinvigoration. In fact, the investment in existing properties today roughly equals what the investment was in new projects in the past. But the reality is there's very little net new supply, as you can see from this chart, in our industry. So if you own real estate, you're actually in a very sweet position. Demand is up, supply has stopped, values are going up, and malls are becoming far more productive. In fact, the productivity is extraordinarily high. I mentioned I was in Latin America last week. I was in Colombia, and we were talking about new development, and they asked how many malls are being built in the United States, and I said, I know of 2 right now in the United States. One of them is in Puerto Rico. So I don't even know if that's the United States in their minds, but it is in mine. I said, how many are being built in Colombia? Today, 47 malls are under construction in Colombia. So clearly the industry is very dynamic, but at clearly different stages of development and evolution. So supply remains constrained and demand remains strong. One of the reasons is our industry is evolving into becoming that third place. When you're not at home, when you're not at work, where are you? You're at, we hope, a retail environment where you're socializing, where you're interacting, where you're shopping. And this is not just a phenomenon in the United States, as you see in these pictures, but it also is a global phenomenon. And it goes back to that very idea of the souk and the bazaar and the forum. They were known less for their individual brands and their stores as a place where you went to socialize, to be together, to be safe, to be protected, and to shop. And the internet does not provide that, but the internet is definitely a tool that helps facilitate all of that. The relationship between the customer and the tenant and the landlord is absolutely fully aligned. And so our industry, we look at the shopper. Where do they shop? When do they shop? And how do they shop? And that's what people want to know in our industry, and that's what a lot of analysis is focusing on. And at the end of the day, we think it boils down to a couple of factors that we'll delve into a little bit more with Kevin. Demographic shifts and technology. Now, neither of those are particularly new, but it's an easy way to summarize where the key issues are that we should be looking at. Now, on the demographic side, globally, the big trend has been the rising middle class, the general increase in incomes and standard of living around the world. And that is a trend which is going to continue, and it's an extraordinary event. The middle class by 2030 is going to have a purchasing power in 2030 greater than the entire developed world today. So that's a very positive thing, a very positive global trend. One of the reasons you see 47 malls under construction in a place like Colombia. In the United States, the demographics, we look at it a little bit differently because there's something quite interesting here. Now, I'm curious, how many people here graduated or would have graduated from high school in 1972, 73, 74, 75? And there should be more than a few of you out there. That was the baby boom class, and at the time it was the biggest high school graduating class in U.S. history. It was that bubble of the baby boomers, and that fueled consumption and fueled our economy. Well, I like to talk about the class of 2010. So I'm curious how many people graduated from high school, 2009, 2010, 2011. Indeed, there are more of you out there. That class, the class of 2010, was bigger than the class of 1973. That's an extraordinary thing and has unique consequences. By the way, the baby boomers are still out there, and the size is there because of immigration, not because of internal population growth. But that class of 2010, they're going to graduate, many of them, from college. this May, and it's going to have extraordinary implications for our economy and for our industry. Among the most significant ones of them, I think, is this enormous shift in who's getting college degrees. Not that long ago, when I was going to college, men dominated the college scene. And in terms of where we're looking today at the graduation rate, women clearly outnumber men, not only in terms of attending college, but graduating from college. That is going to have very, very profound implications on an industry which for so long has been dominated by men, saying they're operating by kind of gut feel, but it's the gut of a middle-aged white male. That's not the future. Women are going to dominate every aspect of our industry. I think that's a good thing. But that's a very, very important demographic trend that all of us are dealing with, and a shopping mall in particular, what's important for the woman shopper in the shopping mall. The other aspect, technology. And our industry really frets a lot about technology. We had a board meeting 2 weeks ago, and the senior owners of the major malls around the world, we were together, and I said, what keeps you up at night? And they said, technology. It's not just online, yeah, that's growing, or mobile commerce, or omni-channel. It's the whole technology thing. And that's what we really want to touch upon a little bit more deeply, because that integration is very unique. Technology and the mall, and that would include all shopping centers, we think kind of goes through three phases: a reaction phase, an adoption phase, and an integration phase. And we've seen this in our shopping malls if you think about the reaction. This is when the internet first hit the scene. There was all of this panic. What are we going to do? How are we going to react? Well, the first thing was put internet-proof stores in your shopping malls. Barber shops, beauty parlors, you cannot get a haircut online. Put them in your mall. Ice cream, it's hard to buy ice cream online. We've seen a huge shift of food, now high-end grocery stores in shopping malls, where 20 years ago, except with places like Westfield, who always had grocery stores, you didn't want to have a grocery store because there were two different shopping trips. Not the case at all. So that big shift in the type of tenant that you had. Also, there was a recognition that it was a social place, you want entertainment. And if you think back 15 years, 10 years, everyone was saying, what's the entertainment in the mall? And at the Mall of Emirates, you have the ski area, so you have an extreme like that. You have bowling alleys going into shopping centers, but just people watching is the entertainment. So things that you could do to increase dwell time through the entertainment and creating more social activities. Then you go into this next phase, this adaptation phase. And in some areas, we're still in this adaptation phase. And that really involves a lot of the integration of some of the technology. The introduction of the Wi-Fi. Analysts were pushing shopping center owners to have a .com presence in the early 2000s, and so they built websites, Simon.com, GeneralGrowth.com, Westfield.com, but nobody really knew why other than the analysts said to do it. Shoppers didn't go there, consumers didn't go there, retailers didn't go there. It was a reaction, and it adopted the technology without really a purpose at that point in time. That really has begun to change. Also, the introduction of other special services, sensory things, aroma, soundscapes, soft seating, all to increase dwell time. Today, we're in that integration phase. That's where we are today. And that's where the integrating of all of the technology and all of these aspects is coming together. Some really cool stuff. One of the more creative things I just heard about was a virtual food court where you go with your family to sit down to have dinner in a restaurant in San Francisco, and your family in Shanghai goes to the same restaurant. You put on 3D glasses, and you're going to have dinner together around the table with your family around the world, and you can do that every Sunday whenever you want to do that, a virtual food court. Some of the technologies that Nadia talked about are rising in this neat integration phase. And some questions, too. Traditionally, our industry charged rent based on how much you could afford to pay, which was based on how good your sales were as a retailer in a shopping center. You charge too much rent, the retailer runs out of business. You don't charge enough, you can't keep up the mall. How do you do that when it's all about eyeballs and footfall rather than cash registered tills and overall sales? Those are some tough questions as we move into this full integration phase. And then also the realization that the role of the shopping mall is really to drive traffic in many people's minds. And so how do you drive traffic? Until recently, shoppers were not rewarded for going into shopping centers. Now there's technologies that are rewarding shoppers with points. For going into a mall, the near-field technologies are doing this. And for going into certain stores, maybe you get double points, and the communication and using of big data from that aspect. So this future, I think, is very exciting on the integration phase. And that's why it's very nice to have Kevin here. I just want to give you a little bit of my perspective on Kevin McKenzie. Really one of the most talked about things in our industry has been this integration of technology, or shall I say the intersection of virtual and real commerce. And while we've seen that amongst a lot of our retailer colleagues, it really hasn't taken place in the mall or shopping center community. 75 to 80% of all sales, retail sales in this country, take place in a shopping center. But it hasn't really integrated and embraced the technology. And there have been very few companies that have invested resources in this digital technology and in the people to run this. Kevin, I think, is the first in the industry to wear this unique hat of a chief digital officer. And chief digital officers are now joining the C-suites in our industries as we're making way for these cyber chiefs. Kevin was a pioneer with, many of you probably know CNET, and a consumer technology resource. And then he founded a company called Jywire. It's been over 10 years ago now, and that was one of the companies that mall people originally said, don't put Wi-Fi in here, they'll come and they'll shop online in our malls. That's a bad idea. Well, that thinking has totally changed around, that if you don't have Wi-Fi in there, the kids won't go with mom, and mom won't take the kids because they can't keep themselves entertained, and you can't get this full integration of the retail. So that has totally changed, and Jywire was really a leader in that introduction of bringing that into the mall space. And then a couple of years ago, the Westfield group appointed Kevin as their very first, and the industry first, Global Chief Digital Officer, and he reports to the co-CEO of Westfield, who, interestingly, is also kind of occupies a virtual office. The company is all around the world, and Stephen Lowy occupies a physical space really all around the world. So, Kevin, if you will, I'll
Sure.
turn it all over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, very nice to be here, and what an exciting time. My history has exclusively only been in digital. I've been in it for about 20 years. I started out pre-Amazon. I went to go work for these two gentlemen in a garage in 1993 that when Mosaic was first coming out, the first browser, they wanted to, and the only audience on the internet were a bunch of computer geeks, they wanted to stick what at the time you'd call an EDI link into this big distributor called Ingram Micro, who sells computer products. And so we launched this thing called the Internet Shopping Network. And in 96, we went to an internet trade show in Santa Clara, and I was at a little card table next to this guy named Jerry Yang and David Philo, who had their little card table, and Mark Andreessen and their team had Netscape, and Barry Diller walked up and he bought our company pretty quickly, which was pretty cool. And then we went, and I was so excited about e-commerce, but like Nadia, who seems like you enjoyed doing customer service, I didn't quite like it that much, and I did not like fulfilling products too much, and so I met the founders of a company called CNET, and CNET, again, because primarily the audience online were people who loved computers and technology, wanted to be disruptive to the traditional magazine world. They were laser focused on big publishers like Ziff Davis, IDG, and they showed me this big book called Computer Shopper Magazine. It was like a Bible of computers, right? It was massive. And they said, we've got to make this easier for people to buy things and learn about things. And so they hired me to build, which still exists today, the whole experience around enabling people to buy consumer-related consumer electronics. And we thought about aggregating content and information about both products in an unbiased way that users could buy, enabling them to see opinion about from an editorial experience, a user experience, and ultimately driving them to where they could buy those products. And we kind of lived on the idea that content creates commerce. and we're an aggregator of content. We're not a reseller, and we drove leads, which then led me to start my own company called Jywire. It's a location-based media company. And then I was going to start another company, and I met the Loeys and I met Westfield, and they said, look, we've got 1 billion in foot traffic, serving 23,000 retailers that generate 50 billion in commerce on this physical platform. And I thought, you know, it's one thing to create great experiences in technology, but it's another if you can have distribution. And so I was lucky enough to get the job to kind of figure out how we could use technology and experiences to ultimately drive commerce and foot traffic. So it's been a fun evolution in my career, and great to be here. And over the last 18 months, which we think is pretty unique for a shopping center company, is one, we're really, I hope someday we're talking about the future. I actually hope we're talking less about the word shopping centers, and I'd like to call them more experience centers. And I think that's where our industry is evolving, and I think we're going to help with that, along with many of you out in the crowd. And then second, we've been thinking a lot about information. You know, it was interesting to me that when I walked with executives through Westfield, they would see a piece of paper on the ground or a cup that was spilt in the corner, and they would stop and they would pick it up immediately. And they took so much pride and passion in that. But then when I would go onto the website, all the information was out of date. Mm-hmm. And I scratched my head and I was like, well, that's like spilling a bunch of dirt in the doorway of your mall and no one picking it up. Mm-hmm. To the millennial back there, I think that's how they think about that. They're driven off information. And so last week we launched this really cool thing called api.westfieldlabs.com. API is an application programming interface that enables developers to get information content about your shopping centers. And so we're really focused on, as many steps, and I'm going to get into a video to show you where we're going, and working with the retail community, working with the shopping center industry, and aggregating information about what's happening in our shopping centers, and really making it easy for software developers, for our retail partners, and most importantly, the millennial generation, to get access to information that's happening about our shopping centers. So before I say anything more, as Nadia said, which I loved hearing, is we're doing a bunch of pilots around the world around how to make the experience better using technology to delight the consumer. We're not a retailer, but we feel obligated to create this infrastructure to make the experiences of our retail partners really great for the consumer. So I want to share a video that gives a lot more detail on that. Will you roll that?
Humans love to be entertained. Humans love to be excited. Humans love to share experiences with one another.
We pride ourselves on being where the consumer wants to be. And those are big, wonderful, historic, well-known cities globally. I think the company has always been innovative for the over 50 years that we've existed. Technology is influencing the consumer more than ever.
It's the convergence of the physical and digital experience that is just getting going. And that is the comparative advantage that physical real estate can have over simply online.
What can Westfield do to ultimately push the industry forward with great experiences, both digitally and physically, for the consumer? So we decided to create an entity called Westfield Labs that just focuses on that.
So the consumer gets a wonderful physical and digital experience that is comparative to no other form of retailing.
We're creating an environment, a digital environment, that gives shoppers the ability to plan their trip before they come to our shopping centers. Things like shopping lists that allow the shopper to search the inventory from the hundreds of stores that trade in a single shopping center. Real-time information about products and services, making that really convenient in a way that they can plan a trip when they're at home and have it with them in their hand when they get there. We want to create a seamless experience across all phases of the shopper journey. Reward them for their frequency of their visits to our shopping centers, and guide them to exactly where they need to go It all comes back to being a great host. The moment they arrive, they're instantly connected to a new world of personalized shopping, which is an important touch point for our retail partners to broadcast relevant, timely, and local offers about products and services that are physically available around the consumer in our shopping centers. One of the biggest initiatives with Westfield Labs is to completely reinvent wayfinding. Actually inject incredible discovery and use wayfinding and mapping as a mechanism to show users not only where to go, but actually what products and services and trends are around them. With one click, we're going to make that all portable right to their mobile phone so they could take that with them and go right to their destination. We're not just thinking about the digital experience, we're putting a lot of work into the physical experience. Services like hands-free shopping. Once you pick out and buy the product, to have it delivered right to your car or even your home. We partner with some of the greatest chefs and restaurants, and consumers love the food experience at our shopping centers. We want to make that experience even better using digital technology. Give them the utility to pick out what they want before they get there, have it ready for them when they arrive, to maybe even having it delivered to their home or to their office. It's all about providing ease of use and the most enjoyable shopping experience possible. When the shopper leaves our center, the shopper experience doesn't end there. Engaging the visitor with new services and offers generates continued loyalty and extends the experience beyond the physical walls of the shopping center. Whatever experience that we can create will ultimately drive transactions and business to our retail partners. The entire retail community is ready to embrace the change and the opportunity that can happen with the convergence of the digital and physical world.
Disruption can be scary. Change can be scary. What has made Westfield successful over more than 50 years in many countries is its vision that you continually need to adapt. We hope you'll join us on that journey.
What's the most extraordinary thing that you're seeing come out of this? What really kind of blows your mind with this?
The adoption. You know, one of the pilots we're doing right now, we launched a couple months ago. So parking's a big issue, right? How awful can parking be in a shopping mall? Yeah. Terrible. And so we really wanted to attack that problem and essentially make the ability for consumers to control their parking experience. And there's two types of parking. There's controlled parking, which is paid, and non-controlled, which is non-paid. And in a controlled parking environment, Westfield London, we came out with this program called Express Parking, and we just piloted on iOS or on the iPhone, and it enables the consumer to understand where spots are available, both digitally and physically, and essentially register themselves and their cars and their form of payment before they go there. And we serve workers and we serve people who go there to shop. And within, we're on week 14, we've done no marketing. We just put it out as a pilot, as a beta, and now over almost 5% of all of our activity is done from this app. And it's growing fast. So I just think we're learning is, as scary as it is to put something new and possibly even make mistakes and put something out there, it actually can work, but don't underestimate how this generation just grasps onto this, and ultimately it's taking traction. I was blown away by the speed. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What mall was that?
It's at Westfield London.
That's
so
Westfield London?
We have two major centers in Westfield London and Westfield Stratford, and they're just these amazing experience centers with food, fashion, retail, and now we're overlaying kind of a digital experience on top of them.
Now, you've done that, I think, already in the United States, in San Francisco, and just last week or so, or last month in New Jersey, the digital storefront.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about that. That was intriguing to me.
Yeah. So we, one of the challenges in shopping centers is, consumer will get to either one wing. We're all creatures of habit, and you kind of just go to either one wing or one floor, and you never actually understand what's in the rest.
Oh, not me. I walk the whole mall.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of our jobs, right? So we have to. And so we basically took these beautiful digital displays, which have the latest technology. It's kind of like if you all love your iPads or your iPhones, Apple really was marketing Retina display. This would be like the equivalent, but for a digital display screen. And we did these amazing high-res pictures from our partners that are selling products in the center. And on one side of the center, we would kind of merchandise stores that were actually available on the other side of the center in a really interactive way. And we found that of about 400,000 people that walk by these things, 15% actually engage, and it actually leads them to a different side of the mall. So we're actually able to use these amazing digital experiences to create discovery, which we're really excited about.
Do they buy things on that, or just Wayfind?
I mean, the first phase, kind of the first utility is Wayfind, but the way we engineer them is absolutely to layer multiple connection points with the retailers from there.
So how does that work with the retailers? What are the economics, and how do they feel about that?
So this was what was interesting to me from coming from a pure digital space is, Westfield always has had this tenant relationship, landlord relationship. We're similar to what we did at CNET, and I have a lot of colleagues at Yahoo and Google. We've kind of developed this more digital relationship with the retailers where, separate from a leasing arrangement, we have a digital conversation with getting them to participate, give us content, give us access to information. And right now it's in really kind of early phases. Just like any digital startup, our goal is to get it right for the user and right for their business and think about the business models last. So there's no formal business other than try this pilot with us, see what the engagement looks like.
So there's no payment, there's no economics now, it's just sharing of content.
Sharing of content.
Are all the retailers doing it? Why wouldn't they?
It's actually, I heard that they wouldn't, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised that they would. In fact, with Garden State Plaza, within less than 30 days, we hired 20 brands and retailers to participate. That food experience that you saw, we're going to do some interesting things with that. We've already got 20 different amazing chefs and food concessions that are participating, and it's in days, not months or years. So it's amazing traction that we're getting.
And are you getting pushback from retailers? Where's the conflict?
I'd say the conflict is, and it's back to the story I told you about when I first started, which is I'm amazed that it's taken this long for people to get digitally organized. Their systems, their content, their data. There are companies like Macy's, for example, has an amazing API infrastructure where they're making their data available to any developer, to any shopping center developer. That's really smart. And I'm amazed that the rest of the industry, that's just kind of always buried to the back. I think content, information is where the industry's lagging, and that's what's hurting people to get involved in these platforms.
So, but that's on is that the resistance on the retailer side?
Yeah, it's not resistance from a business perspective. It's from a technical perspective. It's like, oh, well, I don't know how to get you all that information. But it's no different than what we dealt with in the late 90s at CNET. I mean, when you're aggregating 360,000 product SKUs from thousands of retailers, and you have to organize and digitize and even translate all that, you had to put your own hard work, you had to write software code and grab people and ultimately aggregate this information. So I feel like we're kind of going through the same evolution, but this time there's really no resistance, which I like. It's just how do people get organized around it technically.
Okay, I'm not going to let you off that easy on the economic question, because that's, I think, something that retailers are very interested in as well, that Now, today, when you rent space in a Westfield mall or
Yeah.
any other property, you pay a base rent usually.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, there's a percentage rent based on the sales that take place there.
Yeah.
Some common area charges that pay for the cleaning of the coffee spills and things like that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So if you have these retailers who are selling less in the stores in the mall, and the stores really are just becoming showcases, it's very difficult for you as a landlord to figure out what the sales are, but the company might be having lots of sales, just not happening in the mall.
Yeah.
How do you envision rents are going to be set in the future, for eyeballs or footfall? How do you envision it? What's
Yeah.
the talk in your area about this?
So look, I mean, I look at it from what I learned, right? Which is, I learned that if you aggregate an audience and you're able to help sell products to people or you're able to take that audience and facilitate commerce between the buyer and the seller, whoever does that ought to get paid to do that.
How do you price that?
And in the digital space, that ultimately came down to reach, frequency, and transaction. I think even that aside, though, I think at the end of the day, any retailer that's participating in a shopping mall evaluates whether or not they ought to participate based on the total trade and transactions that are happening in that physical world. And I think the two are blending. So for us, every program that we create, as long as we can connect those dots, that it either helped create commerce when they were there, before they were there, when they were there, or even when they left our shopping center, we ought to get credit for that.
And they're going to share that to you? Macy's going to tell you how that's going for them and then give you what
Well,
they think
I think it comes down to exactly what I learned. And it's funny, in the early days with CNET, we created again this marketplace to drive consumers to buy computer products from retailers. And we went through this transition where it was similar, where we said, okay, well now here's we think a reasonable business model, and they said, no, I'm out. And we said, okay, well, we don't want you to do that. And then slowly but surely, they all started coming back, right? And I think our goal, my point is our goal is we have to be able to show value in order for them to participate in these programs. What the specific details of that, just like in '95, I don't know yet. But we are learning quickly. And I think it's going to happen much faster than 10 years, just given consumer adoption and rate.
Now, it was kind of quick in the video, but I saw a mention of something that we know of. It's called Deliv.
Yeah.
Can you talk? That's a completely new concept, a new product. What is that?
Yeah, so that's really exciting. So one of the big opportunities, or one of the challenges that any technology company has, is you come out with some cool new technology like a mobile wallet or iBeacon or whatever it may be, some new experience. And when it's really fragmented for the consumer, it doesn't work really well, right? So if you're a consumer and you're like, oh, I heard Acme Retailer has this new cool way that I can buy something, and the consumer has to kind of search around and go, well, I don't know where, okay, they only have 2 stores in this area, but I live on that side of the country. It's just harder for them to experience and have that emotion, that amazing experience. And so in a mall, it's unique because you can put all of that together in one. And better yet, in a network of malls, from multiple mall operators, you can even make it better because the consumer can have it wherever they go. So we got together with Macerich and GGP and Simon, who are all other mall operators in our space. Yeah. Right. And they said, hey, we think this same-day delivery thing is pretty cool. We think this idea of giving consumer access to product within minutes or hours as opposed to days is a unique opportunity that we can all help facilitate. And everybody did kind of an RFP to kind of understand that with all of the mail operators, and they're all like, we can't do that, right? So went to Silicon Valley, found this really cool company called Deliv, which is figured out writing algorithms certifying couriers to ultimately have same-day delivery, of which we all made an investment in this company, all 4 mall operators, and we're all activating that as a service for our retailers. And you can just imagine the overlap of retailers from all of our different malls. And then in return, the consumer has a really, like anywhere they go with retailers that are participating in the overlap of our malls, they have that unique experience of getting product, seeing product before they get there and actually having it delivered to their home within hours as opposed to days.
And who pays for that delivery?
So the consumer pays, just like they pay to have their product
Right.
shipped from UPS. They pay to have their product delivered to them in the same day. Yeah,
Okay.
same type of model.
And this is, again, where you have each of the retailers agree to participate in this, and you've aggregated all of the mall owners.
So we're doing 2 things as a group. We're optimizing our buildings to make that logistically work really well. We're training our staff to understand it. And all of us are working with the retail community to actually think about this and hopefully use this as a new form of delivery for the consumer.
I want to ask you a personal question too, because I think it's important for our industry. I'd mentioned at the outset that Kevin is the first in our industry on the real estate side. I think there will be more as the real estate side taps more into this. How does one train to be a global chief development officer?
Digital officer, yeah.
Excuse me. Digital officer.
Well, I mean, I think for one, you have to understand digital technologies and you have to understand the consumer. I would say those are 2 really important areas of experience you need to have for that. And I think, in my case, my whole career I worked only online. I've never worked in any other industry, and really enjoyed.
You should talk to Nadia. She'll get you some experience on the floor.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic what Nadia's done. And so, my job is I understand technology, but then I have to understand the consumer, and then I have to understand the industry. And I'm still understanding this industry. It's still very new, but I actually think it's probably good that maybe I don't understand it in some ways too. In some of the things that we're proposing and doing, the industry's never done, and maybe if we knew how hard some things were, we probably would never propose it. So
Right.
I think it kind of helps either way. Yeah.
Well, Westfield is truly a global company. You have the presence in North America, really in the Americas, the Western Hemisphere, in Australia, big presence and kind of a growing presence in Europe.
Yeah.
The title is Global Chief, not Chief.
Yeah.
Global. Was that a conscious distinction, or that just to avoid alliteration?
Well, no. So our company was born in Australia and grew through acquisition in the United States and Europe. And as a result, when you're growing through acquisition, you have a tendency to kind of grow almost, that we all have some things in common, but the way the company operates can be completely different in some areas than others when you go from country to country. And if you think about digital and you think about the internet, it is global. And so if there's one way that we could kind of unify against, it should probably be that. And that's really kind of where that comes from, as opposed to me just doing that in one country as opposed to another.
Yeah, I think definitely it's the future. I wonder if there are any questions that anyone in the audience might like to ask. I had my questions. Yeah.
How are you working with your tenants to bring connectivity, which is one of the challenging things to the different malls across the globe, so that they can share in the user experience through technology?
Yeah, it's one of Mike's slide said earlier. I think look, in the shopping center business, you invest capital in real estate with a return from your leases, and I think more and more we as an industry are realizing we still have to do that, but part of that investment has to be on the infrastructure itself, the digital infrastructure. And so we're undergoing a pretty massive integration of Wi-Fi. I'm becoming incredibly passionate about Beacon, personally.
About what?
I don't know if you guys have heard of iBeacon. So you have Wi-Fi as one signal of connectivity. A new, not so new, it's actually existed a long time on our phones. It's called Bluetooth. There's a low-powered version of Bluetooth that is yet another connection. It's a beacon, like a Wi-Fi access point, to connect with a handset to a physical piece of real estate. I'm very excited about that, and I think that's something that still has to get the bugs worked out, so to speak, but that is another point of infrastructure that all real estate developers are going to be investing in, and certainly Westfield is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If there are no other questions, thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.